Hey everyone, my name's Lily and I'm the book blogger behind Utopia State of Mind, and I am back in front of my bookshelf with my June wrap-up. I have filmed this now twice. I filmed it before and I have no idea where it went. I went to edit it because it is extremely late. For reference, it is, I don't even know what date it is, but it's the 25th. And yeah, it is extremely late. It's almost the end of July. I'm already kind of thinking about my July wrap up. But yeah, when I went to edit it, I realized the footage disappeared. So we'll do this again and hope that this time it works. So in June, which now feels like forever ago, I read 69 books. I read 33 graphic novels, 36 books, and 3 audio books. I do remember that in my June wrap-up, I wanted to say that graphic novels and audiobooks are reading. I've heard, or when I was filming it, I was hearing all these kind of takes that like graphic novels and audiobooks don't count as reading, and I just want to encourage, and I did also an Instagram post about it, so I just want to encourage people to think about what the sort of decisions about what counts as reading, like what that gives you or what that does for you. And I think, because I think of it as a community, I think that's very damaging to the rest of the community members. But I would urge you, if you think that way, to ask yourselves why you think that, and like what does that reflect upon you as a reader, and or about your own personal tastes, and sort of interrogate why you think that way, and sit with what it does for you as a reader and what kind of harm it could do for other people in the community. So that aside, let's just move on. And I did this tally as well, where it's like, if the things that people didn't count as reading were not included in mine, which that would be about 52% of my reading month. And I felt like this is difficult it's not difficult, it's different for me as well, because I still read 36 books that, people would traditionally count as reading. This is so unnecessary, basically. But so with 36, it's still a lot. And so I didn't want it to be all like, oh, they count as reading and look at all these books I've read. I wanted it more to be, they still count as reading, and then graphic novels really kind of saved my mental headspace in June. I kind of read a graphic novel, or part of a graphic novel for bed, and I found that really restorative to me. There's just something different about reading and experiencing the pictures and kind of that more complete world. I've told some people about this, I'm not a very immersive reader normally. I don't really, like, in my mind when I'm reading, I don't build the characters' outfits or what the character world or whatever. Like, I just am not super immersive in that sense. And so reading graphic novel really makes me see all these things that I probably wouldn't imagine on my own, if that makes any sense. So, aside from that, of the 69 books, and also I've tried to do these tallies and these counts of queer and BIPOC books, but they're basically just, when I go down my spreadsheet and look at them, there are definitely ones that I missed. So sorry, but of the 69 books I read, 31 of them were with queer characters or queer authors, and often both. And then 28 of them had BIPOC characters and authors, or oftentimes both. So each of those are above 40%. For 45% for queer reads, I'm so happy with that, because my target goal is, as always, 33%. For BIPOC books, it's only 41%, which is less than my target, which is 50. So let's just get into my favorite reads. So I decided to do a little section on graphic novels that I really liked. And I don't review graphic novels on my blog really normally, especially for these ones, but I did want to talk about a few ones that I really liked. And if you wanted more reviews or star ratings for graphic novels, you definitely should check out my Goodreads. Link is below, because that's where I will put all kind of mini reviews or star reviews. So let's just hop into it. We have Paper Girls. I don't know why I didn't read Paper Girls sooner. I've heard so much about it. And then I finally decided to pick it up, and I read volume 1 and 2, I think, in one night. I was that obsessed. It just delivered all these timey-wimey goodness, kind of like all in one. I'm a huge timey-wimey person. I really love parallel universes, time travel, all of that continuum kind of stuff. That's one of my favorite kind of elements. And so Paper Girls just delivers that with also this core friendship and also this just rich, intense, intriguing world. So definitely, if any of those things I've mentioned sound like you might be interested, definitely check it out. The next one is Dancing at My Pity Party. This one was just so personally relatable to me. I don't want to talk too much about it, but yeah, it was just so personally relatable. And it's also one of the graphic novels where I thought, I finished it, I want to read it again, I want to buy my own copy. So for most of the graphic novels, I was able to get them out from my library. So wanting immediately after reading it to know that I want my own copy, to me, is a very big sign that I really loved this one. And I haven't ordered my copy yet, but it is in my cart. So it's gonna happen. This one was just, yeah, just personally relatable and emotional, and just about all of these things. And I feel like only recently am I starting to read more books with characters whose family members have cancer. And I'm just enjoying it. It sounds weird to say I'm enjoying it, but I'm finding it really relatable and really personally fulfilling, I guess, to see that in books. And so this has that, and it was just so good. The next one is When Stars Are Scattered. This is a middle grade graphic novel that is told, I think that it's, I'm blanking on all the names. I think it's the same illustrator who wrote Roller Girl, and then that's paired, or they're paired with, I think, another person who, I think it's the one that this is based off of. So he's a Somalian refugee. I'm pretty sure his name was Omar, but please don't quote me on that. And because also it's like almost the end of July, and I read these in June, so over a month ago at least. And it's just this great middle grade about being a Somalian refugee. It has so many highs and lows, and it manages to kind of be relatable without like watering things down. And what I mean is that I feel like when I read some books, they want things to be super relatable, so then they make it so that, okay, it's a book about, okay, this is not a real life example, this is just an example I'm using for this book, for this video, you know, about this girl who is, yeah, like running for her life and is a refugee from an oppressive regime, but also she just wants to be seen, right? And so it's like, that's very valid, but I feel like sometimes the topics get watered down, especially when it's a nonfiction kind of memoir thing. Sometimes they can get watered down to kind of be like, but this is how everyone can relate to this story. But the reality is, especially for the graphic novel audience, the reality is that not everyone can relate to that story, and those stories should also be told, and they should be valued as such, if that makes any sense. I'm in the middle of going through just a lot of things on my shelf and like in my life essentially, and so I was like, I need to film this today, and so everything is kind of all over the place. So if I'm being incoherent, that is why. But what I'm trying to say is that it manages to have these moments where, you know, you're having a really bad day with your sibling. You have all these worries and anxieties, but also at the same time, they have these very big challenges and these very big, I don't know, you know, if I'm going to get out of this refugee camp, which I think a lot of people cannot, you know, relate to. And so I really liked how it didn't try to say, oh, at the end of the day, you know, like we're all struggling. It's like, no, there are people who are struggling more. Watered down is a bad word. I hope that someone understands this, but these stories shouldn't be kind of brought down to that level about this is how it relates to everyone. We should read books and consume media from people and from stories that we can't relate to, and that should be celebrated. And I think that this does a fantastic job at it. The next one is Flamer. Flamer was this contemporary graphic novel. It's also about struggling with your queer identity, and it's also set in like a summer camp, which I've never really been to summer camp, so that was intriguing. But also I loved how Flamer wasn't afraid to kind of make use of all of the space in the drawings. I feel like some graphic novels I've been reading are really, the panels are really small and they have a lot of text in them. But Flamer really was not afraid to take up space without words, which I really just loved. I loved some of my favorite panels were the ones that don't have any words in it. And also Flamer wasn't like, I feel like a lot of the graphic novels are pretty small, but Flamer was bigger than I expected, both in page and also size. And so I really just loved how it was presented. It was incredibly emotional and it made me cry. And then the final one is Displacement, which also made me cry. Displacement is also kind of like a timey-wimey one, but it's about the Japanese-American internment camps, basically around World War II time. And so what I've loved, actually, it brings that subject to a graphic novel format, which is the first I'd seen of the graphic novel format, except in July, sneaky peeky, you will see me rave about They Called Us the Enemy. But anyway, Displacement was also about looking at your queer identity as well in all of this kind of maelstrom of emotions as well. And it also, what I loved about Displacement is at the end, it grounds it in a very much like, what can we do, right? I feel like a lot of these historical fictions, or, okay, I feel like it's gonna be in this video a lot. I think that in some historical fictions, it's all about creating a sense of the past, honoring it, remembering it, and making sure people know about it. Very valid. I love those so much. What I also love, though, is that some historical fictions also can ground it in a way like, now that you know the past, how can you bring that knowledge to what we can do today? And I really loved how Displacement talks about that at the end. And so that kind of just brought it onto another level for me. And not to say that I don't love the historical fictions that I mentioned before, because I really, really do. I think there's such incredible value in not letting people forget the past and also remembering it, honoring it, like fighting against misinformation, all of those different things. But I think there's also a huge value to the question about, well, now that I know about this, how can I help? What can I do today? And so I love how Displacement answers that question. So I want to talk about now adult reads that I really liked. Malibu Rising. So I don't want to talk too much about it because I feel like Malibu Rising is such a big book, it doesn't even need me to say anything. But Malibu Rising, and the reason why I've left it here is because it was one of those examples of a perfect time book. I have this very big belief that some books just find you at the right time, that if you read it any other time wouldn't hit you as hard. Malibu Rising particularly. And what I meant by that is I listened to the audiobook, and I remember just being so emotional while listening to it and being like, what is happening? I'm basically crying while I'm driving listening to this book. Like, do I need to pull off the road? Am I gonna get that emotional? But then as I was writing my review, basically 2 weeks later, okay, so a really long time later, I was kind of thinking, why did this hit me so hard? Like, why did I love it so much, essentially? And so what it reminded me of, and why I'm still including it, is because I think there's such value in recognizing that some books will get you at the right moment, strike while an anvil is hot, and then when that moment passes, or even if you're not finished and that moment's passed, sometimes you should just put it down. And so while my thoughts on Malibu Rising has kind of changed to be a little bit more critical, and it's not that I didn't like it, but just more critical of what happened, on an emotional level, when I finished it at 2 weeks earlier, I just remember being really overwhelmed because it has such strong themes of family. And so, yeah, I've kept it in my wrap up and both on my blog, which is already up, by the way, if you want to see all of the books I read in June. But I've kept it because I wanted to honor how I felt when I finished it, because often a couple of days later I'll write the review or the rating in my chart, but often I don't go back to write the review till later. And so when I was writing the review, I was thinking about why I rated it like that. And so kind of all of these little thoughts were happening, like right place, right time, kind of what did I see in this book? Can I acknowledge any, the flaws in this book? All of these things kind of put together. Another adult read that I really loved was Isn't It Bromantic? I was gonna say Isn't It So Bromantic? Isn't It Bromantic, which is the, I think, 5th of the Bromance Book Club. I was really intrigued about this one because Vlad is certainly a character that I felt like was only really used for comic relief in the first ones, and I felt really bad for that because as someone who definitely struggles with lactose intolerance, I was kind of like, I don't love how everyone is making fun of this. But I feel like in the books he started to gain a little bit more character, and so I was actually really kind of unsure if I was gonna like Isn't It Bromantic at all, because I know nothing about him, basically. I also think he's the least fleshed out of the characters, and it ended up being probably my favorite because of the fact that it has these two tropes that I love, which is second chance romance and childhood crush slash, maybe something more. So both of those kind of solidified its place for me now as my favorite probably, which just feels so ironic and so surprising. But it did that because what I loved is that Isn't It Romantic really shows you so much more about the character than you ever knew before, and in a way that is so endearing. I also really loved both perspectives. Isn't It Romantic and the last one, which I don't remember the name of, were probably my favorite ones of the series so far. And I'm not sure if there'll be more, because I'm pretty sure we're missing people in the bromance book club. I'm pretty sure. I think we're missing the music person, right? I was reading Isn't It Romantic, and I was like, oh, I don't remember reading a book about this. So anyway, it was a total kind of 180 for me for Isn't It Romantic, and in general, the series is just so fun. And I thought also the sense of the bromance, the book club, and the sense of their friendships was just, the foundation had been laid out, in the other books, but it was just realized in such a beautiful and very touching, emotional way in Isn't It Romantic. And the last one in the adult category is So We Meet Again by Suzanne Parks. I have loved all of Suzanne's books, The Perfect Escape, Loathe at First Sight, Sunny Song, and now So We Meet Again. So We Meet Again certainly, compared to Loathe at First Sight, So We Meet Again is definitely a lot more lighthearted, I feel like. I thought the character of Jess was just so relatable, because Jess is at this moment where she's not sure if she should, take the leap and do what scares her, particularly in terms of career. And so that just felt super relatable to me, and I think that's also why I connected so much with So We Meet Again. So definitely encourage you to pick up a copy. This is my arc of it. And now I want to move on to YA books. I divided them into sequels versus not sequels, basically, because I ended up reading a bunch of sequels. Well, when I say a bunch, I ended up reading, I'm just looking at my notes, I ended up reading, let's see, 3 sequels, but still. So the first one I want to talk about is actually the one that's already out, which is The Queen Will Betray You. What I loved about this one, so the first one, The Princess Will Save You, is a Princess Bride retelling. I'm not a mega fan of The Princess Bride, but what I love about it is that Sarah Henning is able to expand upon the world and expand upon the characters in a way that just feels more expansive, I feel like, than the movie. And I haven't read the book, so, if there are differences, I don't know. But I was wondering if The Queen Will Betray You would fall into this kind of second read slump or sequel slump, or what do I call it? Second read syndrome, I think is what I call it more often. But it didn't. There are so many revelations and so much character development in it that made it just seem so fantastic on its own. I mean, not on its own because it's a sequel, but on its own as its own kind of product. It didn't feel like that lull before the finale. It just felt like the plot and action went steadily up. And so because of that, I just so much enjoyed The Queen Will Betray You. I cannot wait for, I think the third one is The King Will Kill You. That could be completely wrong. But the duology was expanded into a trilogy, and I'm really happy about that, because with all of the revelations and all the stuff that happened in The Queen Will Betray You, I'm just so much more excited for the sequel, because there's just so many different threads that Henning has kind of woven through that will just be so fantastic to see brought to life. The next one is Journey to the Heart of the Abyss. I read a beta version of this ages and ages ago, and honestly, while I remembered kind of what happened plot-wise, I totally forgot about anything else. So what I loved about Journey to the Heart of the Abyss is that London takes you straight back into the action and makes you just kind of be resubmerged again. Also, I'm pretty scared of water, and I'm pretty scared of the ocean. And so for me to love and be so atmospherically in love, I guess, with this setting is just really surprising to me, because I could never survive in this world, and this world kind of scares me. And so the fact that I'm still able to fall in love with it, I think is a testament to the fact that London is able to so easily transport you to this world. And I mean, it's hard to talk about the sequel because there are so many I guess, revelations and reveals and stuff, so it's really hard to do sequel reviews. But definitely, if you like the idea of kind of post-apocalyptic London underwater, sea, racing meets family meets politics, definitely read the first one, which is The Light at the Bottom of the World. And then definitely pre-order the sequel, which is this beautiful book here. And then the final one for my sequel section, I guess, is I read Our Violent Ends. And I was emotionally destroyed. I don't even know how to describe the ending because it was so fantastic. If you haven't read These Violent Delights, it is a 1920s, I think it's 1920s. It's a 1920s retelling of Romeo and Juliet set in Shanghai. But I think what I love so much about it is that it totally explodes from there and goes in other directions that are fabulous. And if you've read the original, and you can see all of these little threads, which are such, I wouldn't say Easter eggs because everyone, you know, knows that it's a Romeo and Juliet retelling. If you read the original, you're kind of like, oh. And I think that Our Violent Ends still maintains that feeling while also kind of catapulting us in a sense of action, and it's particularly the ending. I know that people are going to be very interested in the ending of this, considering A, the original, and also B, kind of the world and the characters, but I loved the ending so much. Anyway, I'm just so excited for people to read this because it just felt so satisfying, and I don't know, I just blew through it. Like, I ended up almost dropping every other book I was reading at the time to finish this one, which is one of my most anticipated reads of 2021. So next I want to talk about 4 YA picks. 2 of them are actually the start of series. So let's just start off with one that's already, the 2 that are already out actually are the series starters. So let's start with the first one. The first one is This Poison Heart, which single-handedly inspired me that now I need to go to Rhinebeck. It was just, it was so fantastic. It's basically black girl plant magic meets Greek mythology meets a lot of intrigue. It had this kind of thriller vibe at the beginning, which also changes into mystery, like at various times during the story. The family in it is fantastic. I'm pretty sure that it was an adopted character. I don't have my notes in front of me, but I'm pretty sure that it was an adopted character, and I'm a big fan of adopted characters. And then the Greek mythology thing kind of like came out of nowhere, but I ended up loving it so much. It has botany, plant magic, like it just ended up being so good. I loved Cinderella is Dead, but I have to say This Poison Heart is my favorite now because, I mean, I don't know. I just love things that are plant related, but also like darkly plant related. I don't want to go too much into the book because if you haven't read it, you definitely should. But if you have read it, definitely leave like a little plant flower emoji in the comments because you know what I mean when I say kind of dark plant magic. The next one in that is 6 Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. I don't really know what to say about it except Elizabeth Lim is an auto-buy author. I've loved all of Elizabeth Lim's works. Unravel the Dusk, Spin the Dawn, 6 Crimson Cranes. And 6 Crimson Cranes I knew I was going to love because The Wild Swans is probably my favorite kind of fairy tale folklore. You know, it's my favorite story because, I don't know, I remember watching an animated film of it ages ago when I was a kid, and it just really stuck with me. It stuck with me about how she is the one. Sorry, I don't want to say too much about the actual kind of original of it, but you can Google it, you'll find it. But anyway, 6 Crimson Cranes is a retelling of that, but what I loved is that Lim brings in so much other elements of other folk tales and other mythology and other cultural references. Like, it is just so great. I think Elizabeth Lim has such a way with creating fantasy worlds. This one felt lush, atmospheric, gorgeous, like everything. My buddy read this with Hannah, and I'll leave Hannah's links below. But we both were just so shocked about how much we love this book. I knew I was going to love it, so I did. And yeah, I don't know what to say except I've pre-ordered read arcs of all of 3 of Elizabeth Lim's books. Elizabeth Lim has also written some kind of Disney books, which I have not read. But I've read all of the other 3, and I really love those. And this just adds to it, basically, so much. And I just can't wait for anything really. Elizabeth Lim writes. I'm there for it, basically. And then the other 2, which were not series starters, I guess. The first one that we're going to talk about is How We Fell Apart. I knew that I was going to love How We Fall Apart. I said How We Fell Apart. How We Fall Apart. I knew I was going to love that because Katie is one of my favorite authors. I really loved The Dragon Warrior and The Fallen Hero. Those are some of my favorite middle grade. And Katie is like the sweetest person in general. I'm on the street team for this book, and the publisher actually sent me an arc for it, and it's just so fabulous. It is like, if you loved Ace of Spades, you have to read this. It is so thrilling, and there's just so much. I did an Instagram live, and that's on Katie's page, which you should check out, because I asked all these questions that I thought of immediately afterwards. And what you'll see in the Instagram live is that I keep going back over and over again to the fact that, like, I feel like this thriller is so beautifully grounded in the characters. And what I mean about that is I think that some thrillers can get caught up in the intrigue and the reveals and the action, but I loved how We Fall Apart is so grounded in the characters' motivations and families and cultures, and specifically the expectations and pressures of academia and the stigma of mental health and dealing with that, and sort of cultural expectations regarding both of those things. And Katie just grounds this action in such a relatable and also kind of heart-wrenching way, because you end up doing this thing where you're not sure if you love the characters more or the mystery and the intrigue more. Like, the balance is just so fantastic. And yeah, as I said, I keep going back in the live where I just keep saying they're just grounded so well in, you know, all of these different topics. And it's true, because, you know, it doesn't feel like you're kind of swept away by the action and you kind of forget that people are living it. You always remember people are living it and dealing with the consequences of the action and the, you know, story itself. And the last one is A Lesson in Vengeance, which is another one of my, you know, most highly anticipated reads. This is by Victoria Lee. I've loved all of Victoria's books, The Fever King, The Electric Air. I just love them all, basically. And so I was so excited for A Lesson in Vengeance, which is basically boarding school meets witches, meets sapphic couples, which also meets unreliable narrators. Unreliable narrators is my favorite element in A Lesson in Vengeance. It just is like, chef's kiss kind of discussion of unreliability and that gray space between, how do I describe it? My review has it described really well. I will link that below. But it's like, you know that feeling where you feel like you're being watched, but you look and you can't see anyone? It's that moment where you're so sure, but you can't prove it, essentially. And then when you tell someone, then you're like, oh, there was no one there, right? Like, that entire interaction is A Lesson in Vengeance summed up. Like, that feeling of fear and being watched, but also not knowing if you can trust yourself, is just A Lesson in Vengeance, you know. It's just A Lesson in Vengeance. And so if you love that, and also any of the things I mentioned, you definitely need to read and pre-order your copy of A Lesson in Vengeance, because it just is so compelling. I also breezed through this one. I think I had set aside some days to finish it, and I read it in, you know, half that time, because the intrigue and the relationships of the characters and that uncertainty keeps pulling you through that book, where you're kind of like, I don't know what is happening, and I don't know if they know what's happening, because I read a lot of books where I don't know what's happening, but I read less books where they don't know what's happening. So that brings me, I'm just checking my notes, that brings me to the end of my June wrap-up. Hopefully this one goes fine, and I will see you very soon for my July wrap-up, because it is basically the end of July now. So I'll be ready to film this one basically in a couple days. And yeah, I'm kind of behind overall. I know that normally I have a section where I talk about my personal life and my personal headspace. My personal headspace in life is exhausted. I'm exhausted. That's the name of the game basically for the whole summer. And yet I read 69 books. So if that doesn't tell you about my coping strategies, I don't know what does. Anyway, yeah, if I'm behind, that's why. And I am behind, so you know that's why. In the next video, where, you know, I don't know where I'll be, what it will be, it's not edited, like, I don't know, but I'll just see you in the future. You'll see me around, basically. Yeah, so have a great day and see you later.